Welcome everyone and welcome to my session. I just want to do a shout out that if someone in here scheduled this time slot in this room early on, you might be surprised that I'm here right now. We had a sudden dropout and I had to throw myself in here and do my session instead. I hope that's okay. So you're stuck with me, or you're not. You can leave, but please don't. So welcome to my session called Productivity Through User Adoption in 7 Steps. My name is Adam Deltinger. I'm a senior consultant in Sweden. Feel free to reach out to me on LinkedIn or Twitter. I'm an Office Apps and Services MVP as one of the organizers for this event. So I really hope you have had a blast today. So in this session, I'm going to talk about how to do a better implementation of Microsoft Teams and how to avoid the pitfalls and make your end users more happy, increase usage of the application and so forth. In this case, I'm going to focus on Microsoft Teams, but this could actually just apply to any other implementation as well. So as an employee myself, I have many times received, it's often an email saying, hey, we got something, we got a new application rolling out, and there may be some documentation on how-to guides, some links in there, and this can apply to all sorts of apps and services like a time reporting tool, ticket management systems, or Microsoft Teams, of course. So later this application is rolled out, and I've found myself many times when this happened, never really too keen to actually use it, almost like I was being forced into using it actually. And each time I had to look for that email when I had to use this application and how to do things, or maybe ask a coworker for the 10th time what button to click or so forth. And I feel like I've used the application because I had to, not because I really wanted to. So why is this? Am I a lazy person? Probably yes, I'm pretty lazy, but there's actually more to it. No one really told me why I would use this app or whatever, if it's an upgrade or anything, and how that benefited me in my way of working. I'm sure this tool was better and had much better features and so forth, but no one really told me about them and never gave me an interest of finding them out for myself. So this is already off to a bad start, and this is not how to do. This is not a great adoption strategy. So when we're talking about adoption, what do I mean by adoption? Because it's a very commonly used word nowadays, and Microsoft is focusing heavily on it, creating tons of great content around this for you to use. So why now? If you look back some years ago, we had more easily controlled work environments. People had a computer at their desktop with a bunch of group policy objects, limiting what user could do. Then there was a corporate firewall, of course, which controlled what services and data we could use both externally and internally. It was easier for IT departments to make us use the tools and services they wanted us to use. Nowadays, we have something called the modern workplace or digital workplace. Many, not all, but many users have a bunch of mobile devices, all connected to internet and have access to thousands of apps and services. And it's getting harder for organizations to control these. Of course, you can manage and govern mobile devices too, but many times you actually should do that. But it's more in the terms of security and governance, and not forcing users into using your application. And it's clear that it's far more easy to have your users wanting to use your applications instead of restricting them to only be able to use yours. End user will always, of course, find other ways as well. We heard of the term shadow IT, and they will, just as hackers, for example, they will always be one step ahead, and IT departments will need to put in so much effort into keeping up with this to restrict this. So what we need to do instead is to make our users aware of our application, then gain their interest and curiosity about it, and then hopefully they will use it. And of course, our goal is that they will not only use it, but they will actually like using it, or even better, they will love it and tell other people about it. And when we come to this, we have succeeded. So this is end user adoption to me. So before I'm going to go into step one, I just want to say that each one of these steps I'll talk about here will require a lot of time and effort to complete. But if you, I can promise if you do some or all of these steps, your chances of success is going to be great. So step one, collect important information. There can never be too much information. So in order to do this, you need to find your adoption stakeholders, I would say, and do workshops. And with adoption stakeholders, I refer to people within your organization that knows about your company, your values, culture, processes, and of course, importantly, pains. You need to know why you're rolling out Microsoft Teams in the first place. So I hear a couple of things when I help customers, and I ask people, I ask my customers about this, and often two reasons come up regarding this. And they tell me that they might have Office 365, and they have used they use it for email, and they want to start to use it for the other services as well. They have that's included within the suite. So they already pay for it and so forth. And they heard that Teams is a great tool, so we want Teams, right? And another one is that they might use Skype for Business Online, and as we all know, that will go end of life soon next year. So as Teams is replacing Skype, they need to make a move. So these are all valid reasons, of course, but they don't really answer the most important questions. Also, from the end user perspective, they don't really care about this. They want to know how they can benefit from something if they're going to learn a new tool or application. So I would say that what's in it for me. So in these workshops, you need to ask yourself, sorry, going on by itself there. So in these workshops, you need to ask yourself a few things. Why use Teams? Is Teams the solution? What part of Teams do you need, and in what order should you then implement them, so to speak? And here's where the next question also comes in, the pains. Your adoption stakeholder should be able to tell the pains you and your users are struggling with. So make sure to identify these and how Teams can help resolve those pains as well. And we also have the quick wins and the long-term goals. Quick wins are very important because they help your end users getting excited and interested in the product. If you identify a user pain within your organization and how Teams can somehow fix this without much investment, this is a quick win. So for example, if your users are struggling with meetings, today we know that we can have Teams meetings, and they are great, and there's a lot of features like meetings recordings, notes, simplicity of joining, and so on. So it's all right there, built in, ready for your users to start using. So we can call this a quick win. Find all these and give the users what's in it for me. So also make sure you set the long-term goals. What is it that you want this implementation to accomplish? So we're moving on to step 2, conduct a pilot. So running a pilot is important towards having a successful rollout. And how extensive it needs to be depends on the size of the rollout itself, and the number of users, number of kinds of scenarios you have to test, and so on. It might also be done in different steps depending if you are doing a full rollout off the bat or in sequences. There might also be more than one pilot group. And I think this needs to be addressed during the previous workshops, or you have to sit down and have a new one. So doing a pilot is important, but doing a pilot is important because you need to know what works and what doesn't work. Implementing teams fully and not knowing knowing this will probably just end up with a bad rollout and unsatisfied end users. So now I'm going to talk a little about my take on what a pilot is all about. So also be aware that Microsoft have lots of great content on how to set up and run a pilot. So make sure you dig into that as well. I'll talk a little bit about this later on as well. So first of all, pilot a scenario with common variables to the organization as a whole, meaning that things you try out during the pilot should be something that most of your users will be using. Doing a pilot on, for example, a salesperson, how salesperson can work more efficiently with leads, for example, will benefit your salespersons or sales departments, but they won't do much for the rest of your users. So here find the common ways of work that applies to the masses, so to speak. If you have business units that have very particular processes and ways of working, this would be a good idea to make this a separate pilot as well. Excuse me. So depending on if you're doing one or several pilots, you need to make sure that you have the right pilot users, right? So if you're doing only one pilot, I'd say it's a good idea to have users from all over your organization, from different parts of your organization. This way you will find the most do's and don'ts, and you will be more prepared for full implementation. So now when you found these users, you have to give them the appropriate training as well. They don't need to be experts, but they should receive enough training to fulfill their day-to-day work and tasks they do in their day-to-day work, so to speak, and in the way you also intended it. So in the pilot, you should also try out all these quick wins that you found in the initial workshop. Try to resolve those pains I was talking about earlier with the help of Microsoft Teams. Overall, you should get feedback throughout the pilot, adjust accordingly, what works and what doesn't work. Some intended ways of working might not maybe cut it, so go back to the drawing board and try again. I mean, Microsoft Teams is an awesome service that does a lot, but it does not do everything. And sometimes you find that Teams is just not suitable for what you need. I also recommend collecting the most common questions that are asked, that you are asked during the pilot. And I'll tell you why a little bit, because we will use them a little bit later on. So just to summarize this step, make sure you pilot the right things, and also having the right users as pilot users. So make sure you try out every scenario and then adjust until it just works. So we'll come to step number 3, which is communication. So I'd say this is one of the most important steps and shouldn't be underestimated. It's also important to note that this step is something you do from start to finish during the implementation. So, or even better yet, you continue to do this even after the implementation itself. So, for example, remember that email I was talking about at the start here in this session. I mean, that is communication, although it's not very good communication, and it's far from enough. Communicating with your users about what's going on, how, when, why, is a foundation of good user adoption. So as stated earlier, communicating is something that's supposed to happen, as I said, before, during, and even after the rollout. And also, yet again, Microsoft has made lots of material and content to use here. Email templates, flyers, best practice examples. They have a lot, and I'll also talk about that a little bit later on. And I'll be talking about getting the end users invested in your rollout and in the product you're implementing. And one big part of this is communication. Start informing users about Microsoft Teams ahead of time. What is it? What will the implementation look like? Then you describe why you roll out Microsoft Teams and what the high-level gains and benefits are. Then you also explain the personal benefits of Microsoft Teams, the what's in it for me part I have been talking about. So you need to get your users interested and kind of create curiosity for Microsoft Teams. And here's also where those pains and quick wins comes into play yet again. So you can pinpoint an issue. If you can pinpoint an issue a user have and give them a solution for this, you have come a long way, right? So if you show them this solution with the help of Microsoft Teams, you're already there with that interest and curiosity, right? So during the rollout, keep users aware of what's going on and don't leave them in the dark, so to speak. Keep building their interest and make them feel that they're involved and not really forced into something. So furthermore, Teams is also an ever-evolving service, which means that new features are being released all the time. And many of these may improve teamwork, save time, help you, the users, being more effective. So make sure to keep your users in the loop all the time. So this also applies to my next step, which is continuous learning. So this kind of follows the same track as communication, meaning that it's something you do from the very start and never really stop doing. Hence the word continuous. I've been talking about giving pilot users training, but when the rollout is happening, all users should have some knowledge about how to use Teams. General tutorials and guides can be given to users already before the actual rollout and also during the pilot. But the result of the pilots kind of sets the way of working in place and reflects also the more in-depth training. And the training can be done in many ways, depending on quite a few factors. So how many people need training, location of users, are they spread across many sites, offices, or maybe even countries? You may have training tools already in place that you use. You should preferably use channels for training that users already kind of use today. And you're of course not limited to only one channel, but can use several. So yet again, Microsoft have put in a great effort in creating training material for Microsoft Teams. So evaluate what kind of channels to use. For example, you can start off by sending out some basic emails to your users. If you use Yammer in your organization, you can use that, make some posts. This also goes for general communication about the overall implementation here as well, the communication part. You might have a learning management system in place. That's a great way of doing training for your users. And in most cases, it's really easy to set up courses and add pre-made content to them, having them up and running in no time. Classroom trainings are also very effective, but they also kind of require a set location where users need to go, the scheduling to fit many users at the same place and time, and might not be viable for a large organization with lots of users in many locations. But there's also the possibility to have classroom trainings for some groups of users, for example, champions, which I will also cover in the next step. So remember that Microsoft Teams, when Microsoft Teams is rolled out, Teams itself is also a great channel to get information and training content to your users. And as with communication, training should never really stop. Make sure that users are aware of new features and how to use them, when and how to use them. So as I promised, the next step is the Champions program. So early in the process of your implementation, you should consider to set up this Champions program. So first of all, what is a Champions program? A champion is someone that will help you spread the word and the knowledge and kind of the hype around the service or product you're implementing. They can also be your ears and eyes during and after a rollout to get a sense of your users' thoughts and feelings. You might need to get the right people and set up a team of champions. So A champion usually looks like a person that is keen about trying out new things, and in this case, loves maybe new technology and are eager to learn and start using it. They're typically not afraid of change, and they're often someone that that other people ask for help about tools and technology. This is, however, no rule or a must. I often actually advise customers to find these persons with other personalities as well, like what I call dissenters, users that aren't too happy to change their behavior and habits. They're kind of happy with the things as they are, and they want to stick with it. So if you manage to convince these dissenters, these persons, that Microsoft Teams is a great tool and how it can benefit themselves and everyone else, your other users will actually take notice of this. So that's a good thing. Another tip is to find these champions from all corners of your organization. As I said, they will help your users, and will be a source of feedback as well. So having them reach your entire organization will make sure that all voices will be heard, and help is always kind of nearby. And at the same time, they are also kind of your voice, right? So when you've decided on the selected group of champions, you need to kind of make sure to get the appropriate training for the champions as well. They should know Microsoft Teams pretty well, but not limited to only that. They also should know the goals of the implementation, the high-level gains, as well as the personal gains. This way, they also get more invested in the role themselves, making them better champions overall. So also remember collecting those common questions as well as you did during the pilot. I said to you earlier during the pilot, collect the most common questions. So now you can give your champions the answers to these questions, and that will also then prepare them to answer your users' questions when they arise, because they will probably be the same or similar. So make sure your champions know each other as well, and work together as a team. So in this case, they can then help each other. They can help each other out. They can share ideas and solutions to obstacles some might have run into and found a solution to. So of course, you can use Microsoft Teams for this. So set up a champions team in Microsoft Teams. Create channels for different topics like issues, it could be questions, general information, and so on. And in here they can also have recurring meetings where they can share feedback and status with each other, if any bigger issues have arisen, and how to move forward from that. So you yourself should also be a part of some or all of these meetings, so you can take action upon the information given if needed. So because your champions are all over the organization, they probably hear what your users are saying, if they're happy or displeased. And it's important that you are aware of your user, how your users feel about using Microsoft Teams, in order to take the necessary actions for successful implementation. Step number 6. So me myself have done a lot of Microsoft Teams trainings, including classroom trainings, and they're usually 3 to 4 hours long. And when it's over and people walk out of that door, what happens then? I think most of you can agree with me. It's kind of like business as usual. They go back to work and do what they kind of need to do. So therefore, it's important to time user training in correlation to the implementation itself. The best scenario is that users have access to Teams by the time of the trainings. Although even if that is the case, when people are busy, they tend to do things as they're used to and comfortable with, even if it could have been done faster, better, and more efficient in Teams. So users tend to procrastinate and forget, right? And you will, of course, have your champions helping you to push users forward, but there's still kind of one dilemma here, that every team or kind of business unit work in different ways. they have different tasks overall with different kinds of processes, document types, and they communicate in different ways and so on. And this means that it will vary a lot how different business units will utilize Teams. So when I talk to my customers sometime after my training lessons, I find very often that users now have a team set up and is running, and they started to using it, or they've started to use various parts of it, but they kind of come to kind of a halt, to stop. And this is many times because they have a hard time transforming their old ways of working into doing it with Microsoft Teams. There's old processes, maybe file shares with files they don't know how to make a structure of in Microsoft Teams. And they tell me like that they have started using Microsoft Planner in Teams, but they're often struggling a little bit about figuring out how to use it in the best possible way. And I just also want to point out here is that business critical processes ought to be a part of the pilot also. So every team works in different ways, right? So what I do, and I've seen very good results from, is to do individual workshops with the various business units. And if there are teams working in very similar ways, they can be part of the same workshop, of course. And so what I do is sometime after my trainings, I reach out to the different functions within the organization and their team managers, for example, and scheduling these workshops. And often like 1 or 2 hours is enough. Most important is that the users attending knows about their department's team processes, way of working, etc. So while there, I ask them kind of simple questions, really. How is it going? Are you using Teams? What obstacles are you running into? I also ask them about their specific processes and help them do this with the help of Microsoft Teams right there and then. And of course, sometimes it requires me to take notes and follow up later on, but most often users just really need that final push into start using Microsoft Teams fully. So one issue I run into often is in these workshops is with files, for example. Commonly, they have a file share where the team used to store all the files, and they're now struggling with how to move these files over to Microsoft Teams. And it's usually just a matter of creating appropriate channels in their team, for example, in Teams, that corresponds to their folders on the file share. Then when you help them set this up, they can actually just migrate these files themselves. But things like this keeps them from doing their day-to-day work in Teams today. So I try to solve their problems and optimize their workflow, answer specific questions till they feel that secure enough to make the leap. So yet again, I've seen some great results and increasing usage after these workshops. All right, step 7, measure usage. So as always, Microsoft offers several usage reports that gives you information about how much Teams is used in your organization. So keeping track of the kind of overall usage during and especially after the implementation is valuable to make sure your users use Teams in a sustainable way. You don't want Microsoft Teams to be kind of the new cool tool of the month, and then your users go back to the old ways and behavior the month after. So by checking in on these reports, you make sure that Teams is being used as planned, and that usage increase also over time. So the rollout of Teams might have been successful, but it's actually the outcome of it that really matters. So if by any means usage is decreasing, you should take action as soon as possible and find out why and in what way. So here again, you can meet with your champions and hear out what they think about this. Hopefully, you will also have to communicate with them even before the usage dropped and found out about misconfiguration or unhappy users and taken action upon it already. So, but things can change, and therefore it's important to watch the to watch the actual statistics now and then. How often may also depend, but I recommend looking at it reports every 1 week, especially just after the rollout, maybe less frequently later on. It often takes a while for users to change their way of working and change overall, but after a while, it actually sticks. So you can find a few. Can go over here. So you can find a few reports in the usage reports section in the admin portal. These as a few others as well can also be found in the Teams admin center under analytics and reports. This includes usage activity on a user level, which Teams clients user are logging into, PSTN and live events usage, and the total activity in Microsoft Teams. How to use and react to these reports are, of course, it depends on your initial goals and how Teams should be used. So, for example, take the Teams clients reports. So if you have communicated to users to use the mobile client due to the fact that they might have lots of mobile users, and you see that most of those users don't really use the mobile client, you might have a problem to solve here. It could be due to insufficient information, poor training, or any other reason. So you need to work this out with your adoption stakeholders and champions. So from the Teams client itself, I'll show you a slide here. Team owners can also get analytics reports based on their team's activity, active users, and the total number of messages and activity over time, for example. And of course, this can be a fun fact for owners, but can also be part of your adoption strategy. Many organizations I know put a kind of a responsibility upon team owners to make sure that communication and collaboration is kept within teams. So this report makes it easier for them to acknowledge active users and overall activity. And also kind of like, why not do a fun thing of it and have like the most active user of the month award or something like that. All right, that was all of my 7 steps. I have a summary here. I'm just gonna sum these up. So no need to panic here. There's plenty of resources to help you through all of these steps, and I will show you some of these in just a minute. So first in step 1, I talked about making up your plans and strategies about the implementation, finding the correct stakeholders to get necessary information, how important that is to the implementation itself, and creating as much value as possible for your users is very important. So make sure to get answers to the correct questions relevant to your organization. Conduct workshops about this and get to know the why, the short-term as well as the long-term goals, pains, quick wins, and create your adoption strategy based on this information. Next is making sure your plans of how to use Teams as well as current configuration actually works out for your organization and your users before you actually do the full implementation. So conducting a pilot to test everything out is important for many reasons. It's much harder to change and adjust once everything is rolled out everywhere. And of course, users will have a worse experience, hence making adoption harder to accomplish as well. So also training is affected based on your ways of working, which often are changed and adjusted during a pilot as well. So the key to a successful pilot is finding the users best fitted to participate in the pilot program, find the best scenarios to try out. If business critical processes are part of the implementation strategy, make sure to pilot these, try out quick wins and find all those things that doesn't work or things that can improve. And of course, collecting feedback and make adjustments are a huge part of the pilot as well. Just make it work. So step 3 was communication. Communicating with users from the very start throughout the process and implementation is so important in so many ways. It makes users feel more involved. It creates the interest and curiosity needed to make users excited for Microsoft Teams. It also prevents confusion and resistance based upon users feeling kind of forced into using your product. So let users know about Microsoft Teams, why they are implementing, or why you are implementing it, when and how also. Tell them the benefits, including how they themselves can benefit from it in their day-to-day work. Moving on to continuous learning, and as I said, as with communication, learning is something that you usually should do in several steps all through the implementation. These two might, of course, they intertwine a little bit with each other, of course, but communication focuses more on information about the product and about the implementation itself, and training teaches them how and when to use Teams. So plan for how you will train your users, and when and through which channels training should be conducted. Do you need, for example, your own custom-made training material or use existing tools and content? As I said, use commonly used channels to reach users with content, as well as classroom trainings, learning management systems, and so on. And yet again, use your champions and as super users, and make learning something that happens on a daily basis. So without proper training, there's a big chance that users don't do things the way you intended, and they might be confused and give up, resulting in switching back to old behavior and like ways of working, and you don't want that. So training is not only about tools and features. I just want to point that out. It's also about helping them change their mindset. So people are creatures of habits, and they're used to their kind of work, doing their work and tasks in certain ways. So just for example, cloud services is different in many ways to what people are used to, and it might be hard to grasp and understand. They can be insecure about these. For example, they can be insecure in storing their data in the cloud, not really sure where it actually are stored and how to reach it. And making sure your users gets a better understanding of this, it's equally important, because then if they don't have that, they don't want to use the service at all from the beginning. And yet again, Microsoft Teams is an evolving service, so make sure users are getting continuous information and training even after the implementation. Number 5 was creating a champions program. As I said, champions are used to create a hype and help out with communication and training, push your users kind of into change of behavior and collect feedback, of course. And by having the right people throughout the organization, to have champions throughout the organization and have them had proper training, will make user adoption easier and more effective. So as I said, also set up a champions team and make sure that they communicate and help each other out as well, and also forward feedback from your end users, so proper actions can be taken. So they're kind of your ears and eyes, not in like a espionage way, but more rather like making sure your users are heard and can make a difference. They're kind of also like an extension of your own arm. So the second last step here was individual workshops training. Training for the masses are usually they're very general. Of course, you can do custom fitted training in your own to fit it to your own organization. But most times, the various departments and business units also have their own way of working. I've seen numerous times that users had training. They're still struggling to fit this into their own team's processes and way of working. And by then doing and scheduling these kind of short workshops with the team responsibles and help them set up their team in Microsoft Teams on the spot often makes a huge difference in them actually starting using Teams fully. So just ask them about their way of working, their processes and pains, help them out doing things in Teams and solve their issues if possible. And as I said also before, that Teams isn't always the solution. I see users try to do the same old things also, but now in Microsoft Teams. So take this as an opportunity as well to review their way of working and make it more effective and productive. So yet again, my experience with these workshops are that they're very appreciated and beneficial to the different teams. Kind of like the final kick in to start using Teams for real. So the final step, measuring usage. So I'll just keep this short. Measuring your organization's usage. Make sure you are aware of sudden drops. In this case, you need to figure out why and do something about it. It could also be encouraging seeing usage increasing over time as well. So depending on results, it also affects how continuous communication and training should be handled as well. So go through the different reports now then that applies to your rollout, of course. More often during and shortly after, of course, but then maybe not as often, but still on a regular basis. So throughout this session, I've mentioned that there are plenty of content material and documentation that Microsoft has created to make it easier for you during your implementation. So I will now quickly walk you through some of these, which I really recommend you take a look at. So there's often no need to reduce something that's already exists. And as I've told you, Microsoft is they're focusing heavily on creating all sorts of resources to simplify and increase your adoption journey. So we start off here with a Teams adoption hub. From here, you can reach various amounts of resources about how to get started. Kind of like quick guides, as well as links to training and deeper adoption guidance as well. And if I move on here, from the adoption hub I just described, there's a link that gets you to the tools and downloads, which I want to point out specifically here. In here, you can download project plans, video resources, content to prepare your organization for Teams, and templates, and so much more. So make sure to check this out. And also the link to the Teams adoption flipbook as well. And as well as the Teams customer success kit, which is resources I highly recommend. This link takes you to the Microsoft Docs pages in which you will find a kind of great amount of information about Teams in general. This link especially goes to the information on how you conduct a pilot. So make sure you read through this before you set up your Teams pilot. Then we have the training portal. It's also a part of the Microsoft Docs. And in here you can get great guidance on how to train users, including administrators, and also from administrators to your end users. And here's tutorials, videos, courses, and other content, training content as well. Then we have the Champions program here. The Microsoft Champions program is like a program Microsoft has created for it. Let's say it's a kind of a universal program. Where so you can sign up to, everyone can sign up and join this program, and here you can connect to other champions all over the world to share ideas, knowledge, and the passion for Microsoft Teams. And Microsoft will also send regular email communication here, and they give you access to news, resources, training material. They have meetups at events and so on. So sign up for this and empower your champions in the kind of best way possible here. This link will once again take you to the Microsoft Docs and now to information about monitoring and reports. The page describes the different Teams reports available and links to the more detailed information about each one of them. So visit this page to easily find out which reports you should make use of and how they work. This one is really great, the Microsoft 365 Learning Pathways. This is a great tool to increase usage and adoption of not only Teams, but other resources as well. It's kind of like a custom-made communication site in SharePoint that will be provisioned in your SharePoint Online, in your own SharePoint Online environment by something called SharePoint Online Provisioning Service. It's fully customizable, they're very much customizable, so you can customize it to your own fitting or your own organization. But you can see that's kind of a out of the box training portal. I've set this up a couple of times, and I find it really useful, and it's super cool. So check that out. Let's see here. The team's advisor, I can talk a little about that as well. Yeah, this is still in preview, but it's a really great tool, and I actually recommend you to take a look at this. You run it from the Teams admin center, and what it does, it runs an assessment test in your own tenant to make sure you have all your configurations set up correctly, including licenses, guest access, the domain checks, and so on. And then we will actually also create kind of a deployment team to help you, kind of a Microsoft Teams to help you deploy Microsoft Teams. So it's already set up then with the Teams Advisor bot. It's a kind of a bot that helps you out. They're pre-configured channels and with planner plans with pre-created buckets and tasks to help you out with the rollout itself. So make sure you try this out as well. So with that was all my 7 tips. I hope this has been informative for you. Make sure that you scan the QR code and fill in the feedback form. And of course, don't miss the keynote session here now, just after the session. We have Caruana Gatimo and Vesa Juvenan. Just pick whoever you want to see the most. And of course, then you can watch the recording. Everything here is recorded. And I hope this event overall has been great for you. So yet again, thank you so much for attending my session. If you have any questions, you can post them in the chat and I'll happily answer them. Thank you.